Bourbon Street has always been a contradiction. By day, its historic buildings and wrought iron balconies invite tourists into the past, a glimpse of French colonial charm. By night, it transforms into a carnival of lights and noise, jazz pouring out of smoky clubs, bartenders slinging cocktails as crowds spill onto the street, and the smell of Cajun food clinging to the air. But just beneath the neon glow lies a darker story. Police reports from the late 20th century show Bourbon Street as one of the most crime-ridden stretches in the city. Between the 1970s and early 2000s, the quarter's narrow street saw countless stabbings, shootings, and unsolved disappearances. The problem wasn't just volume, it was visibility. Violence often erupted in plain sight, within steps of packed bars and parading tourists. A drunken argument over spilled beer could become a stabbing. A fight between rival dealers might end in gunfire that sent tourists running for cover. Local police often admitted it was like trying to police a festival that never ended. Some of the earliest notorious killings came in the shadow of Bourbon Street's most iconic clubs. In the 1980s, a bartender finishing her shift was ambushed and murdered in a side alley, her body left only yards from where tourists still partied. In the 1990s, an infamous double murder outside a Bourbon Street bar rattled the city, as suspects vanished into the crowd before officers could close in. For many, Bourbon Street symbolized New Orleans' greatest strength and its greatest weakness, a place where celebration never stopped, but where danger always lurked nearby. The atmosphere of revelry masked the reality of a street that had become as violent as it was vibrant, and in the decades that followed, that contrast only sharpened. Some murders became legends, whispered about on ghost tours, retold in bars, layered into the myth of the quarter itself. But behind every story were real victims, real investigations, and families left to wonder why justice never came. And this is where Bourbon Street's darkest legends truly begin. The 1990s were supposed to be Bourbon Street's renaissance. Tourism surged, jazz clubs flourished, and the city marketed itself as the cultural jewel of the South. But beneath the glow, the quarter became a magnet for crime, and in 1996, the world saw just how deadly Bourbon Street could be. 2 young tourists, visiting from the Midwest, were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were celebrating on Bourbon Street when a fight broke out between 2 local gangs near a popular bar. Gunshots rang out in the chaos, and in seconds, the festive crowd became a stampede. When the dust cleared, the tourists lay dead, struck by stray bullets. The killings made national headlines. Death in the French Quarter, one paper called it. Families across America who once dreamed of Mardi Gras in New Orleans now wondered if Bourbon Street was worth the risk. Local officials scrambled to assure the public it was safe, but the damage was done. What made this tragedy so haunting wasn't just the randomness of the crime, it was the image of Bourbon Street itself. Neon signs still flashed overhead. Jazz bands never stopped playing. Bartenders continued pouring drinks as blood stained the pavement outside. It was the brutal contrast of life and death, celebration and horror, all playing out side by side. Police presence increased, but many claimed it was too little, too late. The French Quarter's narrow alleys gave criminals easy escape routes, and witnesses rarely came forward. Tourists flew home, shaken. Locals shook their heads, saying, "That's Bourbon Street for you." But as bad as the 90s were, Bourbon Street's deadliest night was yet to come. Halloween in New Orleans is like Mardi Gras with a darker twist. Costumes, parades, and endless parties transformed the quarter into a surreal carnival. But in 2011, that carnival turned into a killing ground. On October 31st, Bourbon Street was packed shoulder to shoulder with revelers in masks and makeup. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Shots were fired into the crowd. Screams replaced laughter, and within moments, the festive street became a war zone. When it was over, more than a dozen people were wounded, and 2 were dead. One victim was a young man visiting friends, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The other was a local who had just stepped outside a club. In both cases, innocent lives were cut short, their killers vanishing into the swarm of Halloween costumes before police could react. The tragedy highlighted what locals already knew: Bourbon Street's crowded parties were both its charm and its curse. Thousands celebrated together, but in the crush of bodies, a killer could disappear into anonymity. Detectives struggled with shaky cell phone footage and terrified witnesses who remembered little, and so the French Quarter's legend grew darker. Bourbon Street wasn't just a place of music and freedom, it was a place where, in the blink of an eye, celebration could turn to chaos, laughter to screams, and life to death. Today, Bourbon Street still glows with neon. The brass bands still play, bartenders still shout over the crowd, and tourists still line up for hand grenades and hurricanes. To most, it feels like the ultimate party. But to those who know its history, every corner tells a darker story, from the alleyway ambushes of the 1980s, to the tourist murders of the 1990s, to the Halloween bloodbath of 2011. Bourbon Street has always carried a double life, joy on the surface, danger in the shadows. Police reports continue to list Bourbon Street as one of New Orleans' most violent stretches. Some call it a problem that can never truly be solved, because crime thrives where the crowds never sleep. Others see it as part of the quarter's legend, a place Here the line between celebration and tragedy is razor thin, and so Bourbon Street lives on, a stage where music and murder, laughter and loss, forever dance together in the heart of New Orleans. And here's the question that lingers: if the French Quarter is this deadly under the glow of neon, how many more unsolved murders are hidden in its shadows? Follow us for more true crime stories and unsolved mysteries that prove one thing: behind every celebration, there may be blood. The truth is, no one really knows how many lives Bourbon Street has claimed. Police reports show numbers. Newspapers tell headlines. But the French Quarter's secrets often slip through the cracks, buried beneath the music and the glow of neon lights. Ask the locals, and they'll tell you stories that never made the papers. A bartender who vanished after her shift, last seen stepping into a narrow alley where the lamps had long since burned out. A tourist whose body was pulled from the Mississippi River days after a night of drinking, his last known stop, a Bourbon Street club. A musician found stabbed behind a stage door, his trumpet still lying beside him, as if the music had been cut off mid-note. These aren't just legends whispered on ghost tours. Some of them are in real police files. Others live only in memory, passed down in hushed tones by people who never stopped asking questions, and always, the theme is the same: Bourbon Street doesn't sleep. Neither does its danger. The 2010s were supposed to mark a safer era. Surveillance cameras went up. Police patrols doubled. But crime has a way of adapting, and Bourbon Street's narrow maze of bars and balconies remained a stage for chaos. In 2014, another tragedy brought the quarter back into the spotlight. A gunfight broke out between two men on Bourbon Street, right in the middle of the crowd. Tourists screamed and ducked for cover, but not everyone made it out. One young woman, just 19 years old, was struck by a stray bullet. She died before reaching the hospital. She hadn't come to New Orleans for trouble. She came for the music, the food, the energy of a city that promised joy. Instead, her name was added to Bourbon Street's long list of victims. The story was heartbreaking, but it was also familiar. Once again, blood stained the pavement while neon signs flashed above and jazz played only steps away. What made this case different, however, was the anger it stirred. Locals had grown tired of being told Bourbon Street was safe when tragedy kept proving otherwise. They demanded answers. City officials promised more cameras, more officers, stricter laws. But promises had been made before. Still, Bourbon Street pulsed on. Crowds kept coming, drawn by the lure of endless parties. And behind the laughter, danger waited. Some investigators believe Bourbon Street hides dozens of unsolved murders, cases where bodies were found, but killers were never caught. Many of them were tourists. Strangers in a city they thought they knew, whose stories ended in shadows. Others were locals. Musicians, bartenders, waiters. The people who made the quarter what it was. Their deaths faded into statistics, their names lost in the noise. And here's where Bourbon Street's darkest legend takes root, because unlike other crime-ridden neighborhoods, Bourbon Street doesn't hide its chaos in the dark. Violence here happens in plain sight. Under neon lights. In front of witnesses. With music playing in the background. It's a stage where crime and celebration perform side by side, but that raises the question: if so many murders happen in the open, what about the ones that don't? The French Quarter is older than the nation itself. Beneath Bourbon Street lie hidden tunnels, sealed cellars, and courtyards that tourists never see. Some locals whisper that more than music haunts these shadows. They tell stories of bodies hidden where no patrol ever looked, of secrets the city would rather forget, and sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction. In the late 1990s, workers renovating a historic building on Bourbon Street made a chilling discovery: bones buried beneath the floor. At first, historians claimed they were centuries old, remains from the colonial era. But others whispered a dark our theory, that the past and present of Bourbon Street were not so different after all. That even in modern times, some killings never saw daylight. The idea was terrifying, but also believable. Because on Bourbon Street, one thing has always been certain: what you see is not always what you get. And the scariest part? Some of its darkest stories are still unfolding, because in recent years, even with cameras, patrols, and thousands of eyes watching, Bourbon Street has continued to bleed. And one night, in 2019, the quarter experienced something that left even seasoned detectives speechless.